We've known for a while that whatever the oil industry funded headlines might increasingly desperately claim, electric vehicles are cheaper to own in the long term. Just like we know that they're less polluting overall than fossil fuel powered vehicles, if you're not sure about that, we have a whole bunch of videos that cover everything from resource extraction through to end of life for EVs, so check them out if you're considering going all Shouty Bob in the comments section. But while that's been the case for, well, basically EVs have always been cleaner, recently we've started to see suggestions that despite the lack of lower priced EVs, particularly in the US market, there's a whole rant here about the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's vehicle import rules, and that would go here, but I've cut it for language, and anyway, you can check out our video on that very topic up here, or there's a link in the description. But it turns out that EVs might still be cheaper, even in the short term. So let's look at whether that's true and what that might mean. But first, apparently we were having too much fun asking you to sub and support us, and that made some people really mad. So instead, like, comment, subscribe.
Hey, no, Kate, no, craft work still counts as singing!
Oh well. For folks who have access to somewhere to charge at home, whether that's through the low-power granny lead that came with the car or some kind of dedicated home charger, EVs are almost invariably cheaper to run than equivalent new gas cars. Although certain media organisations have continued to try and push the narrative that EVs are more expensive than gas cars to make that math work, it's required a wildly bizarre calculation that only includes charging at the most expensive rapid chargers, never charging at home, factoring in time that doesn't exist for charging, and being very liberal with how you define how long it takes and how much it costs to fill up a gas car. In fact, they're usually such invidious and deceptive calculations that we make whole videos about them. But increasingly we're seeing that as gas prices have seen meteoric rises, folks are starting to grok the fact that gas cars are just going to keep getting more expensive. And even with the lackluster number and spectrum of EVs available in the US compared to, say, Europe or China, demand has skyrocketed here as it has across the globe. In fact, at the beginning of June, year-on-year demand for EVs was up 38% across the globe. Because of that, manufacturers have been able to continue to sell EVs at a price premium, leveraging both demand and limited availability to increase profits. And it's not just manufacturers who've done that. While we have seen Tesla repeatedly raise prices, we've also seen dealers who tack on markups to cars on the lot, and other manufacturers prioritizing more expensive trim variants of their vehicles. So in that situation, how could it be that EVs could still work out cheaper? Well, let's take a look at this study from Energy Innovation. It compares the cost of ownership for 6 gasoline vehicles and their nearest or actual EV equivalents, looking at vehicles in some of the most common vehicle classes, a variety of small SUVs, a compact stroke mid-size sedan, a pickup, and a, quote, station wagon, or an estate to Brits like me. The team collected data on cost, efficiency, loan options, and calculated out the cost of ownership for the years the car is being financed. The first thing to realise is that most cars aren't bought with cold hard cash. More than 80% of car purchases in the US last year and for the last many years have been purchased through financing. It's pretty rare that people turn up with their pulled from under the mattress dollars, Triganic pews, or worse still, ningies. I mean, who wants to deal with fiddly small change? Drop the cash on the hood and drive off in their shiny new car. Instead, most people put down a chunk of money and finance the rest. In the US, according to Edmunds, the typical down payment is between 9 and 12%, and the study used JD Power's average of 12%, definitely putting it towards the upper end of down payments. Some of you all may be thinking of an automotive down payment of 20%, which used to be the case, but hasn't been the case for a long time in the US, I'm afraid. Yay! Cheap consumer credit and massive consumer debt! In many other countries though, 20% is still considered the recommended amount. Okay, so then the authors assume a credit term of 6 years and an interest rate of 3.85%. That's really going to depend on your credit score and the size of your bribe to the local subnegus. In our case, we got a good deal because at that point Kia was running a 1.9% interest rate for a 60-month financing period, and we get on well with the Ferengi.
I don't know what I'm gonna do about that female.
But if you've got a lower credit score or a smaller down payment, that's gonna futz with those numbers. Continuing down the financing rabbit hole, all of the vehicles include the full $7,500 federal tax rebate. That obviously isn't available to everyone and is prorated depending on your income tax liability. And thanks to the sales cap, isn't available on Teslas or GM vehicles, and Toyota squandered all of it on hybrids, so is soon going to be incentive-free too. Unfortunate given that they've just released their first mass-market EV. The next component that the study includes is the cost of maintenance, using a Department of Energy calculation which puts the cost of EV maintenance at 6.1 cents per mile, and for gas cars at 10.1 cents per mile. If we include the set of winter tyres I bought when we got our Nero EV, I get less than that, about 5.7 cents per mile as things stand, but that would assume that the tyres were worn out, and they're not. Not even slightly. I've worn a whole 2/32, or about 1.5 mil off the tyres. The typical minimum tread depth in the US is 2/32 of an inch, or about 1.5 mil, pretty close to Europe's 1.6 mil. If things continue at this rate, then my tyres will wear out only just before they age out. Also, at some point the car will surely need some servicing, so at that point the cost per mile will increase a little bit. So I wonder if the DOE might be being a little harsh to EVs, but I don't have a gas car to compare them with, and as we know, one anecdote isn't data. It's just always interesting to compare your own experience with the stats. Next up, unsurprisingly, is gas costs. This study looked at gas costs at the beginning of May this year, back when the average cost was about $4.24 per gallon. The average on the day I write this is about $4.89 according to AAA, which would bump up the cost per mile for the gas car a fair bit. But then utility prices have also increased, and the average residential electricity cost has bumped up a little since last year, which is when the price is quoted from. Although that might shift the other way as more renewables come on stream. It is interesting to note that authors chose to use a whole year for electricity prices, but just 1 month for the gas prices, and maybe a little unfair to gas cars. Although the general trend in gas prices is upwards, ever upwards, which is why fracking is even financially viable in any sense now. Anyway, the costs are calculated using an annual mileage of 13,469 miles and using the EPA's fuel efficiency for each vehicle. As we know, every vehicle definitely gets its rated fuel economy. Wait, I'm hearing that's not actually the case, and that gas cars rarely get anywhere near their rated fuel efficiency. Odd. That would push the cost for fueling for gas cars up somewhat. On the fueling front, one other notable thing is that the authors chose not to include the cost of a home charging station. Many EVs still include a granny lead, the low-power portable charger that comes with the car, and that's because the typical commute in the US, 39 miles, although the study uses a DOE figure of about 30 miles from 2018, that could be topped up overnight using the included low-power charging cord. Even if it couldn't, there are very few EVs on the market now with a range under 200 miles, and you could actually drive the entire week without charging. I mean, possibly not in winter, but in summer that would be fine in pretty much every EV available. It's important to realise though that these sums really are designed for someone who has both somewhere to charge at home and someone who can get away with a granny lead. Okay, so what vehicles did they compare? The Hyundai Kona in both limited and SEL trims with its electric siblings, the Kia Niro Premium with its EV variant, the Ford F-150 XL with the Lightning Pro, which does assume you could get a Lightning Pro, and the Volvo XC40 Inscription with the XC40 Recharge Plus, and finally the Nissan Versa S Xtronic with the Nissan Leaf. Based on this comparison, in every single state in the US, the total cost including fuel and servicing to own the Hyundai Kona EV in SEL trim is cheaper per month than owning its gas sibling. And the same is true for the Ford F-150 Lightning Pro, if you're in a position to purchase one. It's interesting to note that the loss of the federal tax credit does, as you'd expect, have a significant impact on the cost of EVs, making them more expensive in all but a handful of states, except for the Ford F-150, which remains cheaper than a Ford F-150 XL in more than half of states, which really speaks to how terrible in terms of efficiency the Ford F-150's ICE engines are. So where does that leave us? Well, the dearth of affordable EVs, thanks again, NHTSA, does make getting into an EV more expensive and more difficult than it should be. For vehicles with the federal tax rebate, looking at the math, it may still work out cheaper than buying a new gas car from the get-go. Of course, that does rely on you having either the money to buy the car outright or sufficient credit to finance the purchase. And sadly, banks and credit unions rarely take into account the cost savings when buying an EV and the impact that might have on your monthly outgoings. And it's realistically dependent on having some kind of home charging. But it really speaks to the importance of actually doing the maths. If you're trying to work out whether an EV could work for you financially, actually tally your daily mileage, calculate your maintenance costs and see whether it could work out cheaper for you both in the short term and, as we know they are, in the long run. And let us know what you find in the comments below. That's it for today. Thank you for watching and we'll be back soon with more. If you liked the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and sharing it with your friends, and don't forget to leave your thoughts below or in our free to join Discord chat room. There is a link in the video description down there. And if you really liked it, why not leave us a super thanks? It's easy to do and everything you send goes towards helping us make great content. If you haven't already, make sure you've subscribed to this channel and our other channel, Transport Evolved Take 2, and give the bell a gentle ring to make sure you're told when our next video goes live. Thanks on behalf of the entire TE crew go out to everyone who makes TE possible. That includes everyone who supports us on Patreon and YouTube, and also those who just watch and share the videos. If you're a supporter at the charged up level, you'll see your name here on my right. And if you just joined, we're sorry if your name isn't showing. We currently render the list every week or so, but sometimes our videos are produced a few weeks in advance. Thanks to our self-driving tier supporters, Chris Maxwell, Matsu, Patrick Boyarski, Bennett Elder, Brian Newton, David Kitchen, Michael Goad, Ricky Leong, Andrew Martin, Guido Drahota, Brophy Wolf, Tezza in the Gong, Gordon C., Stephen O'Donoghue, Kyle Hodgson, Anthony Coates, Regine Fellows, Dan Blair, Jim Burness, Chris Asenta, Chris and Michael Johnson, Peter Dillinger, and Denny Hyde. And of course, out of this world thanks to our Starman supporters, Anonymous Freak, Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, Rory Litwin, Joe Bresney, Reed R., JP Fagerback, Russ, Will Graylan, Matthew Drobnak, Kevin Boroughbridge, Blue Says Hello, John Lyons, Andrew Glenn, Paul Conway, Laura Reynolds, Ellery Hensley, and there's someone else. There's definitely someone else. Oh, there's Ian! Want to be part of this amazing list? You can join Patreon at the link below. Hit the join button below to support us on YouTube or show us your support through Bitcoin, Ko-fi or our cool swag store. Links are all down there. And if you're unable to support us financially, just know that watching the video and sharing it really makes a big difference to our ad revenue, as well as helping us not be devoured by the algorithm. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep evolving.